like to welcome everyone to this panel discussion. You're representing the ICA Health and Wellness Committee. I'm Csaba Jevtic Somlai, and I'm the chair of the committee. And these are some of our members. And let me introduce them first. From me, Shannon Hewitt, but you might know her. She's one of the headliners of the ICA. Laura Grant here. She is our ex officio at the Health and Wellness Committee, and then rolling over somewhere else as of September. Rebecca Rishin, and then Eileen Razy. So we'll be talking about performance anxiety, a very prevalent topic, and for many people a very taboo topic. But before we dive into that, I'd like to say a few words. There are some flyers as you came in. If you didn't see, you may pick a flyer. There's some QR code on the flyer. We try to create. Thanks for Aileen and Shannon for the flyers. We try to create something that really shows everything that we are currently doing and some of the things we have done in the past. In the existence of the Health and Wellness Committee, which was formed in 2020, September. Other than that, we are starting our book club in September. With Eileen is going to lead the first quarterly book club, and what every clarinetist needs to know about the body by Sean Copeland and Jackie McIlwain. With authors of the book, we'll be there. It's going to be an hour session online. So emails and information will be sent out from Jessica Harry, the executive of the ICA, in an email blast. So you'll be able to come to know some information about that. And I will be, as the Health and Wellness Committee, we are focusing on performance anxiety this year. I'll be doing the next podcast with Noah Kageyama, who has a doctorate in performance psychology, and he's been working with Miami and Juilliard School of Music and many other orchestras, as well as he has the website Bulletproof Musicians. So I'll be interviewing him in September. That's it. We can just dive into that, right? So I'd like to ask the first question. So how can we define performance anxiety? How do we see if someone has performance anxiety? And anyone would like to start with that?
I think performance anxiety stems, one, from our expectations. Our expectations can get in the way most of the time. Yeah, I mean, it's mental, but it's also physical changes in your body when you're performing that can be uncomfortable. Yeah.
And like any type of anxiety, when you experience it, it feels very foreign. But there are ways of sort of attenuating that anxiety by getting more used to it through sort of gradual exposure, as with any type of anxiety. So we'll talk about that later, a lot of strategies for coping with performance anxiety. And, for most people, it's not possible to get rid of it completely, but we all kind of work at managing it, just like you work at managing any type of health condition, whether it's diabetes or asthma or high blood pressure or whatever. It's a health condition like any other.
Yeah, and I've noticed with myself and with my students, when I first started noticing that I had performance anxiety, I noticed the physical aspects first, and then when I was able to talk it out with someone, I realized that there are also mental ways to work with it too. And like Rebecca said, maybe some of us feel like we need to get rid of it right away, but there are also lots of resources and exercises that we can use to actually use that energy or performance anxiety to help us out in our performances too. So we don't necessarily need to squash it down and totally get rid of it, but we can use it in a positive way too.
Otherwise it's going to explode at any given time, right? Just like a bomb. I remember my very first, so I was very young when I started clarinet. I was 7, and I had to play 2 folk songs at the end of the semester. And so my clarinet almost reached my knee from my mouth. And I remember just shaking so much in my limbs, both legs and both arms, and actually that lasted for a long time, about 10 years. It was, and I did not know what that was. I really, as a kid, no one told me, hey, I saw you shaking. So there was not a professional musician that would come up to me or my teacher saying, hey, this is, you might want to do this or that. No way that I got help on the spot. So I really like what Rebecca said, that it's a condition. We should not treat it as a seasonal thing. Come and go. It's something that we have to, just like any other ailments of the body we might be facing. We need to treat, and accordingly probably set goals, right? So do we approach performance anxiety as, hey, let's set a goal and let's do something about it, or you just go and read about it, you just talk to people, and you may overcome, you may not, you may.
One thing I really liked about that podcast that you did with Jason Schaefer was, Jason Schaefer is the principal clarinetist for the Colorado Philharmonic, and he's been interviewed many times on the Bulletproof Musician and by Chaba for this webinar, and he has a master's degree in performance psychology. And one of the things he talked about was differentiating between outcome goals and process goals. And frequently, when we give ourselves a goal for a performance, it's an outcome goal. Like, if it's an audition, my goal is to win this audition, rather than giving ourselves a process goal, which is maybe like, well, I'm gonna learn this music better, or I'm gonna get more practice at combating performance anxiety. So sometimes it helps to give yourself more manageable goals rather than goals that are, kind of, way up in the stratosphere.
Vague, right?
Yeah.
What do you guys suggest? Let's say when we talk about your students, if you see that there is a need for, addressing those type of topic, what would you tell them regarding goal setting?
Well, I know what I do in my studio class. When students, so in my studio class at the University of Utah, students will come up and they'll perform what they're working on in lesson, whether it's a solo or orchestral thing they're playing in orchestra. And I always ask them, how are you feeling? And they'll be like, oh, my heart's pounding, or my breathing, I'm short of breath, my arm is shaking. I'll be like, okay, so we recognize the physical symptoms. And then they'll play and they'll get done, and I'll be like, how do you feel now? And they're like, oh, I'm relieved. Oh, my heart's not pounding as much. So then we kind of talk about that process, right? What did you learn there? Were you able to focus? How were you able to manage it? And 9 times out of 10, what they say to me, they'll say, well, the anxiety comes from having to stand up by myself and play, but I know I'm at least for us, they're in a supportive environment. And I think that gives them, it makes them feel a little more relaxed. Now, we're taking an audition, I would not call that, a fun environment, but what they were able to do is process the why. I do think that's important, processing the why. Why am I anxious? Is it because I'm not prepared enough? And 9 times out of 10 for my students, the preparation wasn't the big issue as much as it was, what will they think of me? Mm-hmm. What are they going to say about me? It's always, what does someone think about me, right? And I found that to be a very powerful observation. So.
And that goes back to what Shannon mentioned, is about opposing expectations on us, whether coming from us self as a high expectation that we are used to at practice, or someone else that will be listening to us, and we might have to measure up to.
Right.
And then that creates that
comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comparison. I know that, one of my dear friends is here performing, and I said, I can't wait to hear you play. And he's like, oh, please don't come, you'll make me nervous. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're the best of friends. He's like, oh no, Laura, it's like, you'll make me nervous. I'm like,
no, I'm here to support you. And what I told my students this morning, I said, you'll never play for a more supportive crowd. You might have some anxiety. I said, if you make a mistake, make it the biggest one. Go big or go home. Just make it as big as you can make it, because you will have a supportive audience, right? I mean, this is the place where you will receive the most love and support for standing up here and doing your thing.
Yeah, I think that you're putting a block in the way before you even start to play, and you've put so much time and effort into your practicing. You know, what do you learn from the journey of practicing? You learn so much from that. If you get to stage and something happens, you know, I don't think we should put everything on that. You have to look at, what did you learn along the way? Yeah, you might mess up. It might be terrible, you know, but I think if you look at it positively and say, what did I learn along the way in my practicing to this journey to the stage, you know? And also with that in mind too, you know, we shouldn't just put that block up and say, oh, don't come, or it's going to be terrible. Like, visualize yourself, and this for your students too, when you said that once they were done playing, they felt great. Okay, visualize yourself when you're done playing. What are you going to feel when you're done playing? If you're still telling yourself it's going to be terrible, okay, you've got something that you need to work on. But like, can you visualize a smile on your face when you're done? Can you visualize, I'm happy with how my performance is going to go? I think having that positive mindset going into it can definitely help relax you also.
Yeah. We tend to anticipate the worst.
Yes.
Usually the dread of the event
Yes.
is worse than the event itself.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, what do you guys suggest as preparation for the kids, let's say 1 week before the performance? I don't know when performance anxiety will start for, you know, every person is different. Some people might get really anxious 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. Some people only the day before, or even on the day of the concert.
I think repetition and resilience, and we were just talking about resilience, but repetition is the more your students can either get up and play with their learning, or, you know, play in front of their friends or their parents, the more the student can do that, the more they put themselves in that situation. They understand if something, that's where the resilience comes in. They learn how to recover if something doesn't go just the way they wanted it to. And I think that's equally as important as preparation. It's like the figure skater that falls in their program. They don't cry. They don't run off the ice. They get right back up and they continue their program, and they're trained to do that. Mm-hmm. The first thing a skater learns how to do is to fall and to get up. And in their program, they skate their program, they fall, they don't start over, they just keep going, and they finish the program.
I really like that since we're in the Olympics right now.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
So do you think we, as teachers, professors, you know, that are working with kids, do you think that we actually emphasize that or even teach that in a world of music setting?
Well, I mean, we're small muscle athletes. I think it's okay for us to say we're athletes in and of ourselves, but we're small muscle athletes because we require training. I'm not just going to go stand up and play the Nielsen Concerto tomorrow, right? I would hurt myself, right? It requires preparation and training. Last fall I did a mock audition lab, and we did this audition lab over 14 weeks. And so it was kind of like training for a marathon or training for, it's not a sprint. The training and preparation is a marathon. I think it's okay to look at it in those terms. You're not going to learn and perfect Mendelssohn's Scherzo in a week. It's not going to happen. It's faithful execution and preparation, and also what you're learning about yourself along the journey. But I always tell my students, you're athletes. You want to take care of your body. You want to treat your body well. Don't put crap in it. Be good to yourself. Rest, right? Not staying out all night. And just, rest, nutrition, preparation, that they're all in a symbiotic relationship. And you know, I'm preaching to the choir here because you are a fitness expert. But it's more than just, I'm going to pull my clarinet out and play something. There's a lot of detail that goes into it that I think we are trying to instill in students, right? I think when they're young and they're not fully developed up here, you know, we kind of have to be like, what were you doing staying out till 2 a.m. before your recital, right? But yeah. So,
Can I jump back to, we were talking about the mental state and the positive thinking and having that positive mindset. And one thing that's worked for me and my students a lot is understanding why we're doing what we're doing. Like, if we are so scared to stand up here and perform, why are we doing it? And so I introduce, if you've heard of Simon Sinek, he works a lot with businesses and asks this question: what's the purpose of your business? And so I ask my students the same thing. Why are you playing music? Why are you living this life to kind of get this higher goal? Oh, I want to see the audience's face light up when they find something that they really enjoy, or I want to help people connect with their emotions better. And so I think sometimes having that goal in mind when you're walking onto the stage, it's not just you performing, but you're performing for somebody along the way too. And I think knowing it's that two-way street and that you have a purpose up here that's greater than just playing every single note along the way, it seems to, sometimes my students get a little bit more excited to be able to do that too.
Yeah, so we're becoming more actionary rather than reactionary in our practice in whatever we do.
Right.
I think it is really powerful to know exactly, so an intentional action, why we practice this, why we practice it this way, why we practice it so many times. So to put the why behind those, because it really changes the game and it's powerful.
Right, and your audience, you know, doesn't come to a concert wanting to hear mistakes and hoping you'll fail. Your audience comes there to be entertained. So it's good to remember that people want you to do well, as Laura was saying, you know, they're your great supporters. So, you know, often we're our own worst enemies. We're so worried about failure, we're so dreading the performance. But if we remember that the audience, you know, wants to have a good time, it makes it that much less nerve-wracking to perform.
That's something I say to myself every time I go to perform. They're coming because they want to be entertained and have a good time. And so do I when I play, you know? And I think mindset, working with fitness folks and working with musicians, mindset training is huge. And so are habits and behaviors. And one big habit and behavior I find with my fitness clients and with my clarinet students is this negative self-talk. And saying, you know, they're repeating it to themselves over and over. They've just built this habit, this behavior that now identifies them and their performance. And that takes time to change. Taking a negative thought and turning it into a positive is very difficult. Taking a positive thought, turning it negative is very easy. So we have to learn how to take that negative and turn it to a positive. So something I'll do with both fitness and clarinet students is have them come up with either a mantra that they say, or taking that negative self-talk and figuring out a way to just turn it a little bit into something more, into a positive action or something they can tell themselves. Because if we're always saying, for instance, oh, I can't play, I can never play this high note, or I can't do this, or whatever. It's always like I can't, or no, or something negative. You know, how can you turn that into a positive? And an easy one is just using the word yet, but more so just, you know, switching it from the outcome of I can't do it to, you know, how can you make those small steps along the way to being able to get towards your goal. But that negative self-talk, that's a habit that you created, and it's going to take time to turn it into a positive. You were saying, like, what can you do the week before? You know, you can do that the week before, but that's something you might need to be doing quite a while in advance. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we mentioned, you know, tidbits here and there about, you know, mental tricks we can use, some nutrition. But what are some specific advice that you all say it has worked for you, it has worked for your students leading up to a concert or audition? Let's say starting a week before the event or a few days
One thing that really helps me is I check out the venue. You know, if you know where you're going to perform, the room, you know, and it's possible to see it before you perform in it, it helps to just play in the space, you know, take note of where the restrooms are, where the entrance is, the exit is, just so that you feel a little bit more comfortable. Getting to know the venue really helps. And of course, avoiding caffeine and sugar, because I know all of us need our coffee fix in the morning, but caffeine stays in your system for 6 hours. So you really should try to avoid it within 6 hours of the performance, because it'll give you the shakes otherwise.
Yeah, within the time. But if it's like your routine, and like every day you have coffee, and then the day of the performance you don't, what do you think about that? Like disrupting your routine?
Definitely you don't want to change that, because you might get a
But I
headache.
agree. Don't have it right before your performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Sleep and
Yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah, this point you made is, I think, very important. I did a lot of public speaking work in high school and college and contests and things like this. And in addition to playing clarinet, sort of. Knowing that venue, you know, visualizing it, feeling. And in speech, they used to say, walk out on the stage, say a few words, look around, so it seems then familiar to you, and you hear your voice, and it sounds different on a different stage, just like the horn sounds different. And you're kind of, a young player might be stunned and put off by that. And they, oh my God, you know, I sound weird or something, right? That's one point. In speech contests, they said, get on the stage, walk, say a few words, and then you're more comfortable. The other point is, I think in the last period of time, I don't know how long, the visuals, how do I look, I think has become much more obsessive almost, because the way they see television, the way they see famous actresses and actors and singers, you know, how they look, you know, what are they wearing, how's their makeup, you know, we're about what it sounds like, you know, so emphasizing it's your sound, don't worry about how you look, you know, I think is also probably important.
Well, I was going to say this morning, I mean, we walked right through every ounce of performance anxiety this morning before my clarinet choir performed. We did not get access to the room until 10 minutes before the performance. Now, we had a sound check in there last night. They knew the room was small. And what I kept doing was reinforcing, hey, we're only going to have 10 minutes in the morning. So you need to get your instruments out. You need to have your reed ready. We're going to tune out in the hallway, because when we go in, it's go time. There is no warm-up. There is no doing our scales. It is time to play. So they understood the expectation of what was happening, even though normally we take time to warm up and we take time to tune. We didn't have that kind of time this morning, and so we had to adjust the expectation. And I think, and they succeeded beautifully, because we had practiced that, right? We had, here's the expectation. We're going to come in, we had played the program, but we had been in our concert hall in our band room in Utah. And we get here and it's completely different. And I just said, here's the space. You know, we have to adjust dynamics. We have to be flexible, adaptable, right? That's another thing I think that they've really learned, which is part of the resilience factor, is being flexible, adaptable, and being able to manage those things when something isn't quite the way we're used to it, right? So that was my situation this morning.
yeah.
There are some things we can change and can't change.
Right.
Absolutely. We have to count with that. Yeah.
There's, I think, so much of what we're talking about and what we think about with music psychology goes hand in hand with sports psychology. And so there's a really super great book by Billie Jean King. She was a professional tennis player and now teaches. And she talks about her as far in advance as she possibly can. And if anyone remembers the Battle of the Sexes game,
Yes.
So she talks a lot about this in her book, where she went to the facility where the match would happen. She wanted to know what it felt like when the wind was out. She wanted to know like where the lights were in the stadium, anything that you can possibly think of. What does the floor feel like? What does it feel like to bounce the ball on the floor? She had all of those expectations, so when in the time between that and her match, she then visualized every step of the way of walking out onto the stadium. How would she feel? What does her opponent look like? What does the audience sound like? And also with that visualization was just very positive about the entire thing. That in this case, the outcome was that she was going to beat him. She was going to win the match. So this idea maybe of instilling in that visualization too of this is what I'm going to sound like in this performance, and turning any of that negative self-talk into that positive. On the flip side, and maybe we can talk more about this too, is that especially with auditions, we can't do that. And so one thing that I got into the routine of was calling a personnel manager before an audition or before a performance in a new space and asking what that space might be like. Knowing the map from where I have to park to where I go warm up to where the audition will be. And surprisingly, people are pretty nice to give me that information, or as much as they possibly can. So also when you don't know what you're about to get into, you have that expectation of, I don't know, but I have some vague idea. Or even performing in a whole bunch of spaces, performing at home with carpet underneath you versus performing on a stage with a wooden floor. Turning up your air conditioning so you're freezing cold while you're practicing versus turning up the heater, putting on sweaters so that you're really warm. Because like Shannon said at the beginning, sometimes this performance anxiety stems from expectations.
And you walk into it and you're like, uh-oh.
Right, this isn't what I was practicing for, this wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, and it's the feeling of being out of control that produces anxiety. You know, we want to control everything, so, you know, we have everything, you know, going smoothly, but when things get out of control and things happen that we don't anticipate, it makes us nervous. Like I know for myself, when I am going somewhere else to give a concert, whether it's at ClarinetFest or another university or something, the things I'm most nervous about are not actually playing. It's will the parking garage be full? Will I be able to find my way to will I be able to find my way to the restroom? You know, because I gave one concert where I got lost, and then I got to the parking garage and it was full, and I had to find another parking garage. And so I was late to my warm-up, and so that of course stressed me out, you know, because I was late. So, you know, whatever you can do in advance to prepare for the feeling of being out of control, whatever you can do to control in advance, you will be much calmer as a result. And then when you have your clarinet in your hands, it'll actually feel comforting, more comforting than it was, you know, to arrive at a parking garage that was full or, you know, getting lost.
Yeah, I'm a big, I like to visualize where I'm going to be, and I'll just like Google pictures of the venue, like here, I did that. Okay, what's this hall going to look like? What are these rooms going to look like? What are we going to expect? And my bass horn trio, we would rehearse in a dry room or something like that, because we're like, okay, this room probably we want to kind of simulate something similar to that, you know. But I mean, I'm experiencing all this stuff right now with travel, with reads and short rehearsals and small spaces and not being able to get on the stage or whatever, you know. And you just have to learn how to adapt and overcome and be resilient, and it does take time. It takes time and experience, right? I mean, so
The more you do it, the better you
the
get
more
at
you,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you
Repetition.
still get. I still get performance anxiety, but you have to learn how to control it. You have to learn.
So before we go to some of the symptoms of performance anxiety and their remedy, I would like to ask, so we mentioned a lot about situations that can't be controlled by us. What are some of the ways you have dealt with it in the past? You got into a situation, you know, it was uncontrollable by you, but something that was not expected by you, and you had to adopt some way. What did you do exactly, so that we get into the specifics a little bit?
One thing I did once, I got to a hall and didn't expect it to be freezing cold. But fortunately, I had bought some little hand warmers, you know, so I used those. That helped the situation, you know. I had thought of it in advance. I don't know what I would have done otherwise without those hand warmers, because it was freezing. And my clarinet probably could have cracked. Fortunately, it didn't. But, you know, sometimes those situations arise.
For me, I was getting ready to play a concerto, and I had asked for that certain house lights to be a certain way so I could see the music properly. And I walk out on stage, and they turned the lights off. The lights that I needed to see the music, they turned them off by mistake. And so for about 30 seconds, I looked at the conductor, and we kind of asked the lighting guy. Well, the lighting guy wasn't there, so there was no one up there to change the lighting for me. So what I did is I just kind of moved my stand as far as I could where I could have light on the part. I had some of it memorized, not all of it, but that whole night I could barely see my music. So I was having to have the stand in a certain place, and then I was having to stand at an angle so I could see the music as the light was hitting it. And I just thought, oh my gosh, my first thought was, I don't want to do this. This is a pain, and this is a pain, right? Like, I've done all this hard work and I don't have any light to see my music. And then I thought, well, I have a job to do and I have to perform, and people want to hear this wonderful piece of music, and the orchestra's worked hard, and we're just going to do it. And I just, did the best I could at trying to see the music and didn't panic, but it was challenging. I might have missed a couple notes here and there, but I was trying to just concentrate on the performance itself. But that was something out of my control. And in that moment, I think I could have been, well, I'm not going to do that. This is insane, right? Or, well, I can see it well enough, or mostly well enough, that I think I can do this. I'm going to be, the first thing I said to myself is, this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to be physically uncomfortable because I cannot see what I'm doing. However, I'm a professional, and I'm going to make music. I'm going to do something for this audience, right? Because they've taken the time to be here. And that was kind of my motivation.
That's a good way to take a negative and talk it into a positive. That's a good.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable.
I don't want to do this, but.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember I had a similar experience playing in Phoenix with lightning, and the lightings when I was at the venue, the concert hall. They didn't turn down all the lights that they were going to do that at the concert. So it was a huge surprise. So I had to actually use my phone's backlight to position it on the music stand so I can see more of my music, because it was harder to see. So that the video portion is contrasted in the dark, and the audience can see that. So it was, I tried to figure out. So yeah, absolutely, we have to be solution-oriented, flexible, and not panic, but really going to, okay, what can I make out of the situation?
Well, you said it, flexible and adaptable, right? Because you really, there's really nothing else when all else fails, there's nothing else you can do to control the situation. You have to adapt to whatever your environment is in that moment, right? As uncomfortable as it might, I have forgotten my readers. Now let me tell you something. My stand was like about 4 feet out here, or as far, where I could see the notes, right? But I was like, how in the world can I forget my readers? Now, number one, I've got readers in every clarinet bag, every backpack. Every bag I have is a pair of readers. But I was like, well, I'm just going to move the stand out. I didn't have my friends didn't have readers, so I was like, great. So I just kicked the stand out to where I could see it. But I thought, what's the lesson learned? To have a set of readers in every bag that I own, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's, because I'm older. There you go.
I also like what Rebecca said, the preparation part. She had warmers before, and that was early. I was still in my teens, and there was a clarinet player that told me, you gotta just prepare. So from that moment, wherever I went to perform, I had cigarette paper with me in the clarinet box. I had screwdriver. I had some glue if the pad fell out. Something, cigarette lighter, something that really you can prepare for those events.
I thought about that coming here. Like, what if my bass clarinet isn't allowed on the flight, or what if like something happens with the, bass clarinet's always without adjustment. I'm like, I'm at a clarinet conference. I'm sure I can find my clarinet to use. It's gonna be okay, like everybody's supportive here. You'll be fine,
Yeah. And so I'd like to go to those scenarios when the clarinet is functioning well, good acoustics, sheet music is there, the reader is there, everything is set, but you still have anxiety. What are some of the things we can do to ourselves or for ourselves to really either calm down or alleviate, eliminate something we can turn it into a positive cognitive mental experience before, during, and after the concert?
I think during the concert, one of the most destructive things that happens is the negative thought process. You play something, it doesn't go as you wished, and you think, oh no, that was a disaster, that was a big mistake. So maybe if you just change your terminology a little bit, rather than think of it as being a big mistake or a disaster, just call it a boo-boo. A little boo-boo that's not so significant. That actually helps. Also, focusing on the sensory rather than on your thoughts really helps. Like if you're feeling really nervous and thinking all these negative things, feel how the keys feel in your hands, feel how the mouthpiece feels in your mouth. Sense the echo in the room when you play, and that will kind of distract you from your own destructive thought process, because you'll be feeling rather than thinking. That really helps me a lot.
There's an exercise that I really love that kind of takes us from that left brain thinking to the right brain thinking right before we play. Do we have time? Can I take 2 minutes to go through it? If you haven't read Don Green's Performance Success, this idea of centering down to switch from being really analytical to tapping into that creative or that sensory kind of feel. This is an exercise I do before I practice, before I come in to do a discussion, before I do a performance. And it takes a really long time, like any other clarinet skill, to understand how to do it quickly. And I'll take you through the rapid version of it, but I encourage you to practice it like a few times a day. But it might take 10 minutes at first, but now I do it like as I'm walking on stage, and I notice these thoughts of, oh my God, don't mess up, play all the right notes. I know that I'm still on my left brain, so I can do this in about 10 seconds. But it's called centering, and you can center up or center down, but the idea is to take your energy that you have and just focus it to be able to help you. And so the first step from that is to form a clear intention. We've talked about having these process cues. And a clear intention might be, I'm gonna warm up for 15 minutes. I'm gonna do long tones for 10 minutes. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna play this concert. Something that's your goal for right now, for that thing. And then after you have your attention, then you pick a focus point. And this is the important one to take us from this analytical to the creative side, is that you just bring your eyes down, and it can be like on the stand in front of you, it can be on the chair in front of you, and that's going to shift us to the right brain. If you think about when you're overthinking something and you bring your eyes up, that kind of puts you in this analytical end. So where your eyes are is super important. And then you can even close your eyes at that point and focus on your breath. Maybe it's 10 breaths, maybe right before you perform, it's just a... But when you're practicing this, to really bring that focus to your breath. And then after that point, releasing tension. So think about your key muscles that you're using while you're playing. How does your jaw feel? Where are your shoulders? Where are your elbows, your wrists, even your knees if they start to lock? Can you feel your feet melt into the ground? And so you do that body scan. And after that point, finding your center. And if you don't know exactly how to find your center, go hula hoop, and that will help you find your center. It's a great way to do it. And then find your process cues of smooth air, or like your sensory expectations. Feel the keys, feel your feet on the ground. And my favorite part after that is that I think about all of my energy at my center, and I'm gathering all of that energy that I have, maybe the shakes that I have, I'm putting it into my center, and then I'm shooting it out my eyes, and I'm bringing that energy out into the audience. And this, every time for me, it totally helps. But at first, it might take 10 minutes to go through this, but the more you practice it, the quicker it'll be, so you can do right before you play.
And I think in that centering exercise, a key is really that energy that we collected here inside in the center, we actually project it out. It could be anything outside of you, a wall, a chair, a floor, a point on the floor, something that we actually can release. It's really important. And it's a very effective tool. One can learn it 2-3 weeks and start feeling really beneficial. You know, first couple of times or first week, you might not feel anything effectual in you, but really as you practice it and you pay attention to the exercise, and these exercises are online on YouTube, or you can read it from many sources. The general common exercise. Thank you very much for those.
I love that, and I think that goes along too with having like a routine, like teaching your students or ourselves to do this type of thing even before we practice, so it becomes this habit, and we feel it's just a natural thing. When I'm working with fitness folks too, having routine is huge. Daily routine, the things that we do every day, and there's a lot of similarities between fitness and music. But you go to a workout, you're going to stretch beforehand. You're going to prepare your body. You're going to prepare your mind. This is fantastic. I'm going to use it tonight.
Yeah, I feel like what Rebecca said, like the clarinet is the comfort in some of those moments where you feel so nervous. Like for me, this is also my comfort.
Yeah, sometimes I tell my students, when they're really nervous, think of the clarinet rather than being a clarinet. Think of it as your little pet in your hands that you're stroking and calming yourself down, feeling the beautiful silver keys, feeling the nice shiny wood, and then it becomes something friendly, your supporter, rather than your enemy.
I know that too. That's good.
I would like to we'll talk about a little bit of sleeping order, sleeping disorder related to performance anxiety. It's a very important part of how we're going to go by the day, the next day after a nice sleep or a horrible sleep, right? So Rebecca, would you touch on that?
Well, let me first say that sleep is probably one of the most important yet underrated medicines out there. It's the only medication that you don't need a prescription for, that's free of charge, and has virtually no side effects. And it cures so many ailments. You're tired, sleep a little, you'll feel better. You're anxious, sleep a little, you'll feel better. You're depressed, sleep a little, you'll feel better. But we so often neglect our sleep. And so it's really important before a performance to get a good night's sleep. They've even done studies. People can go longer without eating than they can without sleeping. People have gone on fasts for like 2 months, but drunk water, and they've survived. But the record set by someone who tried to go out with no sleep for a really long time was 11 days and 24 minutes. So sleep is really essential. You can't focus on your performance without sleep. You might fall asleep at the wheel and have a car accident and die, or you might be able to not walk straight when crossing the street, and you might get hit by a car. So it's so important, and it's neglected a lot.
Thank you very much. Let me tell you guys a very recent story about that. So me and my friend arrived to London a week and a half ago, so we were kind of traveling. I used to live there 20 years ago. Anyway, so both of us got sick. We didn't know that was allergy, sinuses swollen, and so I still have some of that. Anyways, so we are just doing what we planned for a week, and then 2-3 days ago I decided I'm gonna go back in the afternoon. I'm not gonna do those things, listen to those things, and go to those concerts that I planned to do. But I'm gonna go back and sleep a little bit. So I did so, and I slept 2.5 hours, and it was so much better. By the time I woke up, this just really subdued completely, and it felt so much better. Next day I became better, and the next day was just even better. I don't even feel anything that is in my sinus, only my nasal cavity. So absolutely, my body just needed energy to recover and he could not do that because I didn't give it time and the space to recover. So absolutely.
Yeah, when we don't have sleep, it causes stress.
Yeah,
Stress hormone too.
yeah.
Plus, we think differently when we don't have the sleep. We make different decisions. It's been measured.
Yeah.
And also, even if we have enough sleep, we think differently in the morning than in the evening time of the day following the sleep. So it is very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, if you go without sleep, you can even hallucinate, if you have consecutive nights in a row with no sleep, so it's very important.
I'd say that most of the acute symptoms of even performance anxiety, can be resolved by a couple of simple questions. Did you eat enough? Did you sleep enough?
Did you drink water?
Yeah. So those questions. Now, we're going to mention a couple of resources, and we open up the time. We'll have 10 minutes from the audience to receive some questions or any other comments once we mention these resources. So, Aileen, you mentioned the Dr. Green, Performance Success.
What's the name of the author?
Dr. Don Green. He originally was an Olympic, or he still does work with athletes, with Olympic athletes, and then started doing work with musicians as well.
Yeah, different orchestras, and also the San Diego SWAT team. He worked with police force before, and so that's how it came. And he started to hold performance success courses at Juilliard quite a while ago, and then the person I'm going to interview, Noah, he went to Juilliard with violin performance, and he changed his trajectory to performance psychology from that because of those classes that he received from Don Green at Juilliard. Some other resources.
Probably the earliest ones are the inner game of tennis and the inner game of music. Everyone has mentioned the similarities that music has with sports. Even the terminology is similar. We practice, we have coaches, we have goals, we strategize. And so the inner game of music is based on the inner game of tennis. We focus so much on the outer game of the plan, the fingerings, the notes, the rhythms, the pitches, the phrases. But the inner game, how we think about everything, our psychology is so important. If you think of that basketball player who's trying to get the ball in the hoop during the free throw and how tense that silence is during that period, that's kind of what it's like when you're up there on stage trying to flawlessly execute a technical phrase. So there's so many similarities between sports and music. So those are great books. I believe Timothy Galway wrote The Inner Game of Tennis, and Barry Green, no relation to Don Green, wrote The Inner Game of Music. So those are both great. And also, Chava mentioned the Bulletproof Musician website. That's another great resource. Yeah.
And we have 3 other books, Performance Strategies for Musicians, How to Overcome Stage Fright and Performance Anxiety, and Perform at Your Peak by David Boswell. Is that the right pronunciation? Mind Over Matter, a handbook for musicians to help you overcome performance anxiety by Susan Wykes. And then Performance Anxiety, a workbook for actors, singers, dancers, and anyone who performs in public by Eric Meisel.
Noah Kakayama also has a centering worksheet too. So if you wanted to get really great at this, it's like a 10-15 page worksheet that you have to buy from him. And one other book that I really like to add to that is also 6 Weeks to Finals by Sharon Sparrow, if you're interested in orchestral auditions, which can transfer to any performance too. She takes you through a lot of these exercises that we talked about too.
Thank you. So let's open up audience question.
I came to this, I'm a physician. I came to this, I brought something, I gave it to Saba, and related to sleep. Because some of my family members had sleep problems, so I wrote something I thought was some imaging, and helping relax and some things like that. But he's got it. If you want to look at it, it may have some merit.
Okay.
And there's also a short one, is haiku, which is 3 lines, which is so 2 items. But I mean,
A technique, right?
pardon me.
If I understand the haiku.
Haikus, yeah. It's 5, 7, and 5, or 7, 5. I forgot which the exact syllables, numbers. They're very short. But the other one is more. I explained to you, but he has it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
if it means anything or is helpful, it's fine. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, any questions related to yourself, maybe people that you know, maybe students you are working with? If there's anything you can ask us, this is the time.
Yeah, and this might be you if you're a physician. I've often thought about, there's a physical reason we're like this. It's the adrenaline starts flowing in our bodies. And, you know, we all feel this. And for me personally, I'm like about to perform. I've been prepped, I've done all of those things, and I'm thinking, what the heck am I playing the clarinet for again? And then I get out there and I perform and it comes back to me. But I think there's, and I try to work with this, and then you may have better suggestions of one, the water I think is really important. You have to have enough water because then the adrenaline levels probably are changing in our body a little. If we're dehydrated, the adrenaline is more concentrated. But and sleep, of course. But also just managing that adrenaline so that it doesn't take control of me, which is what I try to do. I hope I'm doing it, as opposed to, you know, taking beta blockers or something, you know, that's going to stop that from even happening. But how do I manage that adrenaline so that I think it's there for a reason. And so I'm on my game. So, but how do I manage that so I don't turn that into that negative, but I turn that into a positive so that I'm
That's
better.
a great question, because once your heart rate, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a threshold. Once your heart rate crosses over a certain limit, then the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, because you have the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, and then you have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. And so once your heart rate, I think controlling your heart rate's a big one, because once it gets over a certain amount, then there's just an automatic trigger of hormones, or norepinephrine, that is released into the body, where it causes it causes for your blood vessels to have more blood going to your muscles, and it gets ready for you you're either fighting something or you're running away. The interesting thing is, we're not running away from a bear, we're not fighting a bear, right? We're walking out on a stage, but your body doesn't know the difference. It's just like, I'm in a perceived threat, and my heart rate is up, and my breathing is shallow, and your digestion stops, and there's certain things that your body shuts things down to give more energy to the muscles, so that you have, you can have more power. And I think it's a great question of how to control that. And I think one of the things that's really important is to control your heart rate. If you can, with meditative breathing, something where you can just, a lot of times before I go out on stage, I check my heart rate. And I'm like, okay, I'm at it. What's my rest? If you have a little sleep monitor, most people have a monitor. What's your resting heart rate, right? It's usually, for me, it's 60, 55, whatever, when I'm sleeping. And it's going to be different for everybody else, but there is a threshold to where your nervous system will transcend or go over to the sympathetic side. And I think it's important to know where that is. But breathing, deep breathing, trying to lower the heart rate, I think that's one of the biggest things I tell my students to do, is like deep breathing. If you're shallow, if you're hyperventilating, that's not going to help the situation, because there really is, other than a beta blocker, there's nothing you can do to stop the fight or flight from happening. What you can do is, when it happens, it's kind of like they're kind of like a yin and yang. So when you're in it, then I'm like, in through the nose, out the mouth, slowly and just slowly, methodically, to get my heart rate back down. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
It's somewhat the flip of that. The adrenaline comes up, when you're anxious,
Right.
fearful, angry, whatever. In sports, sometimes the adrenaline is hugely helpful. You know, these people that have that, they go, like the person who had that long jump that was like 2.5 feet longer than anybody, and then the record lasted for like 35 years, and he doesn't know what he did, but the adrenaline, it's like people can tear a car door open, you know, at times when superhuman strength is exhibited, but that's adrenaline. The adrenaline then drives the heart rate faster, so it's the opposite. The heart rate doesn't make the adrenaline increase. It's the other way. Adrenaline drives those things. Low blood sugar drop, you're going to pop the adrenaline. And so you're going to have so that's why you can't come starving to play. You have to have some support. Sugar is not poison. Sugar is part of organic chemistry. It's got to be there. That's what you burn. Your brain burns ketones and glucose. That's the two things that can burn. Okay, so you need some blood sugar. Interesting. The vital signs are heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, and that's what you're referring to, the vital signs. And that's important. She mentioned it, essentially. So that's why the imaging, I mentioned it in the thing I wrote, you know, the image things that always bring peace, you know, whatever that happens to be for you, or something you just bring that you look at. It could be a floral arrangement, it could be, you know, something from Bon Appetit magazine or something. You know, so keep some of those images maybe with you before you perform. And then you drift to another space, you know, and it's a space you love. You also tell students, you know, you own the stage when you're on it. You have to emphasize, I think, to a student when they're going to perform. You own it, and just keep talking. That's your space, not their space.
And they have to tell themselves that. They have to tell themselves that.
Imaging is really crucial. It's the same with when people are in labor. You know, they have these what are they called? They have a term. I should know the term, shouldn't I? I'm not an OB. But anyway, but they have people image things, you know, whether it's a picture or something, you know, it tremendously helps their management of their own labor when they're delivering a paper. So that type of thing, in war zones, you know, which we learned in the military, I was 7 years Air Force, they teach you how to manage your fear. And it's an objective thing. It's an objective thing. It's not a subjective. Subjective is feeling, wishing, hoping, fearing. Those are subjective. So you try to objectify. So if kids have certain fear, and I had a wonderful nurse who came up with this. She said, package the fear in something physical. It can be a little locket that you wear. It can be a pocket or in your. You close your case after you take the horn out, and you put an object. It can be a pet rock. It doesn't matter what the object is. It could be a pen. This is my fear, and you lock it in the case. So you objectify and put it somewhere. And sometimes people, for sleeping at night, with their worries and fears, they have some. It isn't necessarily the words of their fears. It's something completely different. You know, it could be like, you know, a French fry or whatever. And you put it in a drawer and lock it at night. And it's out of you. You objectify it. It's there, not here. And now I can relax and sleep. I mean, it's worked, I know, for some people. So, yeah. I remember one time I saw Sinatra live singing one time with the Basie band. It was just an incredible experience. And he was singing along, and he started going, but he forgot the damn lyrics of a song, just in the middle of the song. He probably sang the song, I thought. He just, people loved it. He's a real human. He didn't do it on purpose. You know, we all make mistakes. He's making a mistake. He's still singing, but he's not singing English. I mean, it was absolutely, and the people loved it. They started clapping.
The great Frank Sinatra, I'm actually told that he used to get so nervous he would vomit before each performance.
Oh,
and
really?
he was so amazing. So even the best performers have
Sure,
performed.
Sam did that.
Yeah, I know. She
Lady
didn't go
Gaga
on
is
live
like
tours
that
for the
too. She's
longest
very,
time.
very
Yeah.
anxious before concerts. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I would like to, as a closing, refer back to, for example, Don Green in his book. He specifically categorizes people into different groups with different symptoms of performance anxiety and offer solutions for that. And generally, breathing, even in this centering exercise, breathing is just a physical something that really calms the body down and calms the mind down.
As far as your breath, and correct me if I'm wrong, but every time you inhale, your heart rate actually goes up just a little bit, and every time you exhale, automatically your heart rate goes down. So if you can, breathe in and then take a long, slow exhale out,
longer exhale.
and that will really calm you down. Just like even 4 rounds of that, and you'll be surprised. I was in another session that we actually did that. And I mean, the whole room changed, right? Because everybody did it together. And the room was so calm by the end of 3 breaths. It was incredible.
So Thursday morning, Shannon led a stretching mobility exercise session out in the park. And actually one of the things we did is quick inhale or regular inhale and a slow 8 count exhale. It was really good towards the end of the session. Absolutely. So, very, very nice. Yep.
Yeah, we just did up for 4 quick, and we actually used our arms. Quick it down. Just do that a couple times. If you have like a little routine too, something you're used to,
Do you all meditate?
I should, but I don't. I wish I could do it.
I'm just kind of a fidgety person and I can't do it.
I'll tell you that mountain biking is my meditation. I'll get on my bike. I can ride right from my apartment in Salt Lake, and I'll go for an hour or an hour, whatever. It doesn't have to be a hard trail, but it's just very meditative. The rhythm of the bike. I don't have the clarinet in my hand, but it's something meditative for me. That's very, it's very peaceful.
Exercise is very important. I think probably all of us do that. And I mean, for me, I love to swim because the water is just so refreshing and relaxing. It's a great stress reliever. But exercise helps to relax you. It gets your heart rate going way up. But then afterward, you feel much more relaxed. So if you're really...
Yeah. Right, yeah.
I used to do similar to meditation. It's more like alpha sleep, really close to sleep, between sleep and kind of like consciousness. And it is very, very relaxing. If you do 20-30 minutes of that, it replaces about 2-3 hours of sleep and rest of the body. I have done that since I was 16 by one of my teachers. Explanation, and it was absolutely amazing. The benefits. So it's very similar to meditation.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
thank you very much. It's just already after 3 o'clock. Thank you very much for coming, being here, posing the questions. If you have any questions, if you want to learn more about the health and wellness and the things we are doing, will be doing in the near and more distant future, let's say in a year, just take a leaflet and just scan that QR code. It will lead you to the ICA Health and Wellness website. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you.